name is Sara Fischer. I'm the media reporter with Axios, and I'm so excited to be here at CES in the center of everything at the Stagwell booth. I'm joined by the CEO and chairman of Stagwell, Mark Penn. Mark, thank you so much for letting me come and get to pick your brain about a few things.
Thank you. Glad to talk to you again, Sarah.
It is chaos right now in the media world. The last time we spoke was at Cannes, and I remember there was a lot of optimism. We were coming out of the pandemic, and people were finally excited to be spending again and experimenting. But now fast forward just 6 months, and it's a totally different picture. You have chaos on the social media platforms with Elon Musk taking over Twitter, uncertainty around advertising, and chaos in the media industry. Not just the uncertainty around advertising, but lots of consolidation. And so my first question for you is, should marketers be worried about 2023, or is there an opportunity for optimism?
Oh, I'm generally an optimistic person, but I think even if you go back to what my attitude was 6 months ago, it was that we would see more fragmentation in the media, that in fact a lot of competition has set in, and that Facebook has to deal with TikTok and Google has to deal with the Amazon and Walmart marketplaces, and the networks have to deal with Netflix, and even if that's nascent, it still is kind of an introduction of all that streaming time to advertising-based streaming in a much bigger way outside of just Roku and others. So I think this fragmentation is something that will generally help advertisers in the sense that competition brings down prices. And what's the most difficult thing for a marketer? A marketer has to reach people online on an effective targeted basis, an effective and affordable targeted basis. And a lot of digital marketing didn't scale up. And so I think this will be an opportunity for people to find new avenues. It will create a new emphasis on measurement. I think it can continue to emphasize the importance of performance marketing. And a lot of the things, I think, as you know, that Stagwell brings to the table, I think become particularly important in a more confusing media environment.
Let's talk quickly, though, about that measurement piece, because Nielsen has been such an incumbent for television. Right now, there's so much pressure on them to modernize, and there's a lot of pressure on marketers to give guidance and figure out, okay, what is the metric that we need for our ROI, especially at a time when budgets are really, really constricted. What's your advice?
Well, I think you're going to have to go a little custom here on some of this, right? Because first and foremost, between your pedals of brand marketing and performance marketing, and I remember I was the client also in one of my various hats. And so I would always, if the CFO was walking down the hall, go the other way. So during a recession, if you're the marketer, avoid the CFO at all costs, because they're going to think your budget is the one to cut first.
Yes.
But the truth of the matter is, now that a lot of your budget is performance marketing, right? Performance marketing has revenue attached. Brand marketing was a little harder to measure revenue for, whereas performance marketing is much easier to measure results. So you tell the CFO, not so fast, okay? For every dollar you cut my performance marketing, you're probably going to have to cut $3 of revenue. And that is a real stopper. So I actually think that the marketing mix today helps safeguard marketing budgets from otherwise being kind of decimated out of fear of an economic recession that, let's remember, hasn't occurred yet.
Yes.
Because people keep saying, well, how come your marketing companies like Stagwell are doing as well as you're doing? And I keep saying, well, because we're the part of the economy the Fed wants to restrain that they haven't restrained yet.
Yep, but how long are we in this period, do you think? Is this just Q1, Q2, and then the back half of the year it gets a little better? Or does the uncertainty last more than a year?
Nobody knows the answer to that question. The whole idea is for the Fed to create uncertainty so that people will pull back, so that inflation will get reduced, so that it could do the opposite, right? And obviously everybody's waiting for the opposite. So I think most people are saying, look, the first half of the year could be slower, but they're expecting the second half of the year to come back to something more normal, right? And the pessimists are pushing out things another 6 months. I don't think anybody is pushing things out 2 years.
Yeah.
Right? I think, and you know, I if you look really carefully at the inflation numbers, already a lot of those numbers have come down. If you look at the last 5 months as opposed to on an annual basis.
Yes, that's kind of the sense that I'm getting too as a reporter. Most people are saying it's maybe 1 to 2, maybe 3 quarters, probably not more than that. You mentioned the performance marketing piece, and I wanted to follow up on that because right now, most marketers, when they think about efficient performance marketing, they think about the platforms. But what we were noting before is there's a lot of volatility on these platforms. Let's take, for example, Twitter. Twitter is a great place for performance marketing, but it's now owned by Elon Musk, and that's been a totally chaotic regime. Do you think Twitter is a place where marketers should be right now?
Look, I think that, I always say that if you're not advertising on Twitter because you think it's a sewer, it was a sewer. I actually liken Elon Musk to being the roto-rooter of Twitter, right? His job is to clean up Twitter. It obviously was polluted as a platform. We all knew that it was an extremely divisive place on which to place advertising. Advertising was never a big part of, Twitter advertising was never a big part of people's budgets. I think that frankly, at the end of the day, Twitter will become a more effective place to place advertising. I think right now it's not a big factor either way. If you hold back your Twitter advertising, it's probably was like 5% of your budget anyway.
Yeah.
And if you don't hold back, maybe you'll pick up some bargains because people aren't there at the moment, but they are getting users. So if you're going to follow the users, you have to keep evaluating the cost effectiveness. But I do think Elon Musk has to look at the advertising formats, has to look at kind of making companies or advertisers' ability to be in kind of places they're comfortable with, in conversations they're comfortable with advertising in, and to make that more effective. I think he has work to do to make it a better platform, but I sure don't think it's worse than it was before.
Okay, but what would you say to people who argue that the platform's become more filled with things like hate speech, that it's become more chaotic because he's rolled back content moderation? Do you believe that he's actually going to eventually prioritize that type of stuff?
I think he's going to get a better handle on it. I think that we were under a false illusion. Content moderation had gone way too far on some of these platforms. I mean, I myself personally, I have a political game 270. My ads were banned as political ads for my game because
on Facebook.
On Facebook, because young people couldn't tell the difference between once they got the censor's pen between a real political ad and an ad for a game. So I think this had become the Wild West of censorship in many ways. And I do think that this is going to make for better social media in the end. And in the interim, like I said, Twitter wasn't an effective part. I think one of the things that Elon Musk has to do is to put a team of people. How do you make Twitter ads better, more effective, and how do you control where they appear relative to the conversation? Look, every word in Twitter can be analyzed by a bot or computer. So you can take every bit of hate speech that there is and not put an ad there. That is maybe one of the easiest things to do, right? I don't think he's going to make it the Wild West of hate speech. I do think what he's going to do is put back both sides of political speech, and that is going to increase the number of people who go on the platform.
Wow, and how long do you think that takes?
I think that is 6 months to a year.
And you are one of the top press strategists. Obviously, you led a huge revolution in terms of Microsoft's strategy, PR campaigns. Now you lead many agencies at Stagwell. One of the constituencies on Twitter, I think, needs some advice, and I would love to hear your advice to them. You have a lot of media companies who have partnerships with Twitter. They've inked these partnerships to air videos on Twitter, and there's a lot of upside for them, almost no downside. Yet at the same time, Elon Musk is banning journalists, including the journalists of some of the companies that, have these partnerships. What do you think they should do? Should they continue to have these partnerships with Twitter, even though they can be beneficial for their business, even though Elon Musk is, arbitrarily suspending their journalists? Or do you think they need to take a stand and make a point right now?
Look, I think Elon Musk got overexcited because maybe he thought somebody was attacking his child and got hyper defensive about it, and then he stepped back. I think the problem with what Elon Musk is doing is he has to go back and watch Citizen Kane a little bit, right? And what does Citizen Kane do first? At least in his idealistic phase, he put out a statement of comprehensive principles. And I think the problem with what Elon Musk is doing so far is that he's been operating ad hoc. And so he pings over here and pongs over there and creates, I think, a lot of misimpressions. He ought to sit down, go away for a week, with a group of people, come back with a document that people can understand, say, here are the principles I'm going to operate under, and like them or not, and then implement those principles. Until he does that, he's going to have mass confusion.
I think there is a lot of confusion, but to your point about the 6 months, one of the next big questions is, will he be CEO in 6 months? He put out this arbitrary Twitter poll, which is funny because you're a top pollster, so I'm curious your thoughts on using that kind of poll. But he basically said that he would step down because the people said that he should step down. Do you think it's possible that a new CEO can come in and actually make these changes? Will Elon let them and give them the opportunity to do it?
We did a Harris poll that said that people did want him to stay as CEO.
Wow.
And I did a pretty extensive, if you look at the Harvard Caps Harris poll, frankly, Elon Musk's attitude outside the journalism community is pretty good, because he's seen as somebody who's standing up to the big forces, and America loves that.
Yeah.
And so his favorable rating was really actually reasonably high. His ratings generally were much higher than the old Twitter. 64% thought the old Twitter was just censoring political speech. I don't think you should underestimate it. Now, I don't think he has any business being CEO of Twitter. I think he knows that. I think again, he has to set a series of principles here. He has to get a CEO. He has to get a management team in place. Look, I know what it is, even though I started as a political consultant, we run today at Stagwell 14,000 people. And the first thing that I did when I did a merger of another company was get my principles of operation, set the values of what we're doing, have a 48-page plan, and get a leadership team in place.
Yeah.
Okay, now, this is one of the most creative, best managers in the world who managed to make an electric car and a spaceship ahead of a zillion other people. Do I think he could solve the Twitter problem? Yes, but he's got to get out of the mode that he's in now and follow these really concrete, obvious steps. And then he will calm down, I think, the kind of tensions that he's, I think, rightfully getting right now.
I'm going to be very curious to see if he actually takes those steps and does it in a timely fashion. But let's quickly pivot and move on. Another huge player that we're thinking about right now is obviously Netflix. They've introduced advertising. Disney has introduced advertising. Clearly, there's a lot of pressure from the streamers to make their services more lucrative as the competition sets in. But this creates a lot of opportunity for advertisers, more places for them to put their marketing. What do you make about the streaming influx for ads, and who do you think is best positioned to capitalize and win?
Well, I'm loving it overall. More ads, more places. Again, it's kind of what we do at Stagwell, try to find, the right places you should advertise. But look, think of it this way. In the old days, we were always amazed that people spent 4.5 hours per day in front of what we called the boob tube, right? Or television, right? And so consequently, now when you look at it, people spend an average of 8 hours a day on streaming.
Wow.
Almost twice as much as they spent on television, right? And so that's a remarkable statistic. So either they're not working or they're not sleeping or both, okay? So we don't know which. But that meant that a tremendous number of person hours was being taken out of the advertisable universe, right? And now they're being put back into the advertisable universe in an addressable way. And look, I think Netflix advertising is new. It's going to take a while to catch on. So did Facebook advertising. So did Google Words. So did everything. But I think that it's likely to be quite successul because as long as it supplies data and information about the people who are being advertised to, so that advertising dollars can be effective and retarget people, in a way then that you could get the full value of the ads.
Yes, I'm too very bullish on streaming advertising for clients, but one of the areas where I'm really hyper-focused on is an area where you have expertise, which is political ads. We are, as a country, spending more on political advertising than we ever have, almost $9 billion in the midterms in 2022. But if you look at the breakdown of where the money is going, yes, there's a huge increase in connected television and streaming, but it's still a tiny piece compared to traditional local broadcast. Why is that? And when, if ever, does that switch over?
Well, most political advertising is local. And so even though you have kind of great national databases on people, you don't have really good congressional databases that Sarah, I know you, and I know your congressional district, and I know your habits. So I think the targeting on that is still imperfect, right? And so to really make and I would also say that A, you have to have the targeting better. B, you have to have formats that people can adjust to. You know, in the political world, we were used to, you do an ad overnight, you put it on 5 days, you take it off, you put another ad, right? Corporate world, you do an ad, you put it on for a year.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, and in the online space, you effectively have to target a group of people really well in a small geographic area. And a lot of that, and you have to do it with an emotion, with a message that has emotional punch, right? And so most online advertising, you don't have sound, right? You have video only. Unlike the TV screen, right? You're only seeing maybe half of it. It's not something that's really attractive to you. It's not a product. Oh, I love that boot. I love that car, right? It's kind of somebody yelling at somebody about something, right? Or somebody, oh, you've got to look at somebody's tax returns. So making, I always say the best TV ads have been made, but the best digital ads have not been made, right? And I think the Netflix format, if the targeting and data is fine enough, right, then opens up the ability to have better streaming, political ads. I remember most of the kind of executives of these places don't really think much about the political market. They don't realize, as you just did, its full size and scope, and they don't realize how they can cater. In fact, they're almost afraid of catering to it, right? Twitter didn't allow political advertising until, a couple of days ago. Facebook banned political advertising for a time. It was a highly regulated space, and they feel if they cater to it, then whatever side kind of effectively uses the medium, the other side may come after them. So I do think there's a little fear about making political advertising as good as it could be.
Yes, I agree with that. And one of the fears that I hear about constantly is, as we move into this new world of generative AI, deep fakes, there's a confusion around how we can vet and make sure political ads, are real and that they are coming from Americans and that they are attributable to the people that say they're buying them. Being that we're at CES and we're talking about new technologies, are you bullish or bearish that all this new tech, again, ChatGPT and Lensa, is going to be one day okay for democracy, okay for our political world and political ads? Or are you scared that it's going to cause a lot of chaos that we can't quite control and wrap our heads around yet?
I'm a big First Amendmenter. So I think control is bad, more or less, and that you've got to let the marketplace of ideas, unfold. Now, I think it's one thing to be taking out the influence of foreign governments, and I think we have pretty good technology, and our government has pretty good technology too, to be able to identify real foreign influence. But in terms of people having domestic ideas that they're expressing all over the place, I do have basic faith in the voters, right? As long as they get all sides to make a decision. That's what democracy and our democracy is based on. And the internet platforms were supposed to open that up further. So when I hear everybody wants to control what the debate, and if we don't control the debate, people are going to make the wrong decision, I kind of think the opposite, that it is the control that is going to undermine the system. Now, that doesn't mean that you should be able to use whatever word you want. It doesn't mean that that's hate speech, real hate speech, and it should be on. But it does mean that real debates about issues, for any direction, have to be findable, right, online, and that's an essential part of the democracy. And the question is whether or not social media has discredited itself. Right? Right now, 64%, whether you believe that social media is biased against them. Liberals think it's biased against them, and conservatives think that it's biased against them. And social media has to restore its credibility to both sides. And it's not going to do that by controlling speech. It's going to do that by letting the platforms argue issues, right? And controlling those things that we know they're supposed to control. Right? Real hate speech, pedophilia, things, destruction, calls to violence, the things that we know and all agree on are supposed to be banned.
Yes, and hopefully we can figure out and really mutually agree on it, because I think that's been an issue in the past year, thinking about things like anti-Semitism, what are the things that we all mutually agree on are bad? But I want to come back to one last point because we only have time for one or two more questions. You said that we should be good at figuring out which governments are infiltrating the conversation and weeding them out. I think this is a huge conversation right now around TikTok. Is TikTok a threat to democracy? Is it not a threat to democracy? Do you think TikTok is going to be banned in the US, and do you think it should be?
Well, I don't know the answer to your question. I think Huawei was effectively banned in the US, but Huawei didn't have substantial numbers of US clients. I think given the numbers of people who use TikTok, I think regulation, data regulation, and using a process of setting up an independent, data team is more likely to be a regulatory outcome than an outright ban. I'm not sure an outright ban would even be constitutional, to be honest, and that TikTok might win. Foreign governments technically have a right to free speech in the country if you review Supreme Court rulings on this. So you have to be careful when you say, let's ban things. What you really want to prevent is the use of the data of TikTok for illegal purposes. And if TikTok violates that or can't agree to handle the data in specified ways, then it will be shut down by its own accord.
Yes, then it'll be a national security issue.
Exactly.
Final thing, I was at CES last year. It was a much smaller event. I think there's 40,000 people compared to, at the height in 2018, 184,000 people. CES is expecting, I think, 100,000. What has your experience been? Do you think it's on its way back to being what it once was? Will it ever get there? Or do you think it's just a new world for this conference?
I go back at least 20 years. One of my jobs was working with Bill Gates and his keynotes at the end. And, I remember particularly the keynote where he went out to say that all entertainment would become digital and movies would be digital and sound and music, etc. And how right he was, right, at predicting that, and kind of how everybody waited for those keynotes. So today, everybody isn't waiting for the keynotes in the same way, but they still have a complete fascination and interest with the boundaries of technology. I think here at Stagwell, we are taking augmented reality to the next level with our Around product. We're taking AI to the next level with our Profit product that takes your news release and figures out, Sarah, whether you're going to write positively or negatively about it, and then lets us rewrite the release.
Wow.
So we are working on those things, quite directly. And I think there's a natural interest in that is satisfied not by just searching online, but by coming here and seeing the products and meeting the companies. And I think the whole new areas here around healthcare, I think, are particularly interesting. Although I wrote in Microtrends over 10 years ago about people becoming self-data geeks and do-it-yourself doctors, now they're getting the real capabilities to go ahead and do that. And I do think we're seeing some significant advances. I think CES has a long future.
Yes, I think so too. And that's why I'm glad I'm here. And I'm so glad to have been able to speak with you, touch base. Thank you all so much for joining and for listening in. And just so you're aware, Stagwell here at the middle of CES has this booth. Mark is doing excellent interviews all day. So make sure to check them out on Stagwell's social channels and on their website. And I'll be tweeting them out as well. Thank you.